We will talk about that in more detail after the break. But now we're going to have our post-test. Then I will answer your questions. And then we go to break. So, this is the competition. It didn't matter if you got the answer wrong the first time. It didn't count towards the competition. But now we see if you learned. Are you ready? Depressed mood is thought to be associated with dysregulation of which of the following? Norepinephrine in DLPFC. Is that mood? Serotonin in ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Is that mood? Or both? What's the right answer now? And the answer is 2. Let's see if you got it. Whoa, very good. Good learning. And the race comes round and red might get it by a nose. Yes, red by a nose. Okay, what do antidepressants increase? Monoamine receptors, monoamines, or both? Increase.
I must have got lost. I must have got lost. I must have got lost. Somewhere down the line. I must have got lost.
And the answer is 2. Whoa, good learning. And looks like green comes back. Yes. SSRIs do which of the following? Number 1, increase serotonin. Number 2, down-regulate serotonin receptors. Or both.
Wrong thing. You make my heart sing.
Both. Oh, very good. Most of you knew that. Good learning. Everybody's learning today. Very good. And it looks like maybe red or green. Who was it? Green. Blue, we need to make your move now. What is the theoretical advantage of a dual-acting antidepressant over a single-acting antidepressant? Number 1, pharmacological synergy. Number 2, earlier, broader spectrum of patient response. Number 3, higher remission rates. Number 4, all.
One way or another, I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna get you. One way or another, I'm gonna win you.
Okay, maybe all. Let's see if you agree. I think 77%, now 92%. Very good. Run them again. Oh, blue came better? No, but blue's still not quite. Red, almost perfect. All put together, we have the winner of the first lap for the best psychopharmacologists so far in all of Brazil is green. So, please bring your questions. Do we have the microphone if someone wants to use that, or are they all just written? Just written? You said that the norepinephrine pump removes dopamine from the synapse on the prefrontal cortex. But what about COMT, catechol-methyltransferase? What's COMT's role on the mechanisms of SNRIs? This is a very sophisticated question because I did not tell you the whole truth. There are 3 mechanisms for inactivation of dopamine, not just the norepinephrine reuptake pump. Another one's diffusion, because if it just diffuses away to low concentration, it just stops working. But the third one is an enzyme, COMT. COMT is very important in prefrontal cortex because if you have high COMT, what happens to your dopamine? Low dopamine. If you have low COMT, you have high dopamine. There are two genetic forms of COMT, one with high activity and low dopamine, and one with low enzyme activity and high dopamine. Who's smarter? Low COMT, high dopamine. So people are looking at COMT inhibitors that work in the brain. The Parkinson's COMT inhibitors don't get into the brain. But it is a very good question. COMT, not in the striatum, but in the prefrontal cortex, is very important to the action of dopamine.
Bom, nós temos aqui uma pergunta. Nós temos uma pergunta, o aumento de peso e a alteração sexual dos SSRIs é, em sua prática clínica, tão maior assim do que dos duais? Weight gain and sexual dysfunction of SSRIs is, in your clinical practice, that higher than dual action antidepressants?
No. Maybe a little higher, but they're very similar. I think the SSRIs cause more sexual dysfunction than weight gain. I think that maybe there's a little less sexual dysfunction with SNRIs, maybe a little less, but it's not dramatic. And there's no head-to-head study that proves this to me. So they all cause 20 to 30%, I think, particularly ejaculatory delay and orgasmia, but about the same. What do you think?
I was paying attention to this,
okay,
so I didn't listen to you. Ok. Nós temos aqui 3 perguntas em uma. Explique o ganho de peso dos SSRI. So we have 3 questions in one. Would you explain weight gain in SSRIs? Explique as recaídas ao longo do tratamento que foi eficaz no início. Assim. Explain why, recaídas, relapse during the treatment that was efficacious in the beginning. E por que as monaminas caem e isso provoca depressão? So, why monoamine go down and this brings depression?
I don't understand. Well, let me take the first 2 and then you can explain the last one a little bit. Weight gain. I think paroxetine is the worst. The other one's not much. I mean, the problem is I practice in America, we're all fat. We all gain weight every year. So if you take an antidepressant and gain weight, you blame the antidepressant. I actually lost weight last year, but normally I gain weight every year. And I was not taking an SSRI, so I can't blame it. So it's difficult. I think antipsychotics cause bad weight gain. Okay, that's weight gain. Some of them, in some patients. But antidepressants, a little bit. So I think that paroxetine is more famous for this, but antipsychotics much worse. The second question was, why are the relapse rates?
Would you explain why the relapse rates during treatment that was efficacious in the beginning?
Sometimes, there's 2 answers to that. If you stop your medicine, it doesn't work. I wear these glasses, and if I wear them for 1 year and I take them off, how come I can't see? Yeah. Antidepressants sometimes work like glasses. They work when you take them, they don't work when you don't take them. But there's another thing called poop out, which is you take the medicine and it stops working even though you take it. That kind of relapse may be due to adaptions of the brain, but it also may be due, particularly, I'll show you in the next lecture after the break, to patients who have had many failures of antidepressants before. And so the people who poop out are more often, not always, but more often, patients who have perhaps disease progression from many episodes of depression or many failed antidepressants. Like their brain has shrunk, the growth factors are bad. These are my speculations. There's no data to explain this. I don't believe there is a factual answer, only an opinion. So that's my opinion.
Ok. Aqui nós temos uma pergunta que eu não li completamente inicialmente, é por que as monaminas caem e isso provoca depressão? Alguma importância? The third question is why monoamine go down and this provokes depression and stress. Does it have something to do with that?
Yes, of course there's a lot of interesting ideas about the interaction of stress with depression. There is a famous CASPI study, C-A-S-P-I, and showed that stress plus a bad gene called the serotonin transporter, the short version, if you had 3 or 4 life events and the short version of the serotonin transporter, you are more likely to have depression. So it's certain genes with multiple stresses. This became controversial because CASPI wrote this in 2003. Then there was a famous meta-analysis in JAMA in 2009, which said failure to replicate. But yet then, 1 month ago, in the Archives of General Psychiatry, a new meta-analysis with even more studies did replicate. So it's a signal that explains it in part, but it's not the whole story. Definitely there is an interaction between stress, monoamines, and depression. And it may be more important in some genotypes than in others.
We have 2 more questions. This one is in English, so yeah, I can give it to you.
The downregulation and maybe subsequent upregulation of receptors on the right side, the synapse, can also be related to loss of efficacy in the long run. Maybe. This might be a partial answer to the previous question as well. Is poop out a loss of the downregulation? Or is downregulation ultimately self-defeating? One of the interesting things is that if you also deplete your monoamines, a reuptake pump won't work. In other words, if your monoamines are going down and down and down, and then you give a reuptake inhibitor, boost them. But what if they're gone? You can give a pump blocker, nothing will happen. If the monoamines are very depleted, you can block the pump and nothing will happen because the pump relies on release. And so it may be that some people have to replete the neuron. So these are very good questions, very sophisticated.
The last question. Qual a vantagem de associar SRNI com bupropiona que aumenta a dopamina? So, what's the advantage of associating one SRNI with bupropion that increases dopamine?
Well, you get triple. Bupropion gives you dopamine. So, I love bupropion. I almost never use it as a monotherapy, but I use a lot of bupropion. In fact, the first thing I do, the first thing I do is usually give people an SNRI. But if they come in on an SNRI or it doesn't work, I raise the dose. And if it still doesn't work, I add bupropion. Because bupropion gives you more norepinephrine, which is the weaker part of the SNRI, plus a triple action. So if I didn't tell you this, if 1 is good and 2 is better, 3 is best, maybe. So I like bupropion. It's a very good drug to add. to partial responders to either SSRIs or SNRIs.
So I think we should stop here and continue in
Okay,
presentation.
so we get a break. We're back, 30 minutes? Okay.